start introducing our first speakers.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to day two. All right, my name is Jong. I'm from Yale University. I'm on the executive board for Yale's representative. So first up today, we have Canvas Panel, a component for building AAA user interfaces, with Tom Crane. Come on.
Hello. So this should be me and Stephen Fraser, but he's not here. So unfortunately, because he did all the hard work on this, so I'm just here saying it. What is Canvas Panel? Canvas Panel is a web component, and it renders a AIIF canvas and annotations on it, and provides an API for doing stuff with canvases. It's also like it's a AIIF tag, a custom tag. But why a canvas and why not just a custom AIIF tag like the one on screen now, a kind of manifest tag? Well, that tag is basically what a viewer is. You know, you can kind of fire up UV or Mirador or lots of other viewers, or like the ramp example we saw yesterday from tags like that. It's not a lot more complicated than that, but that's kind of firing up a fully featured AIIF viewer rather than just a component that's like a canvas surface. So yeah, if you want to make your own viewer, or you're building custom UI, or doing making arbitrary user interfaces, whatever, just using bits of AIIF, you need something a bit more low level than just a viewer component. And that's what Canvas Panel is trying to be, to try and encapsulate as much power into a little component like that as possible. But isn't that kind of easy? You know, we've got OpenSeaDragon and Leaflet, don't they do that? You know, and kind of in some ways, Canvas Panel is to a AIIF canvas as OpenSeaDragon is to an image service, or Leaflet is to an image service. But really, it's more like kind of an image tag. It's like an HTML tag that you can just point at a canvas and it will render it no matter what's on it. So we have all these libraries like Manifesto, Vault, AIIF helpers, all these kind of things. But they're really sort of presentation API aids. They help us load manifests, parse them, manipulate them, extract information we want from them. They're not visual surfaces. They're not rendering components. So they're kind of a counterpart to what Canvas Panel is trying to do. So the reason we really need it, rather than just, well, you can use OpenSeaDragon, is that canvases are complicated, because although most of the canvases we see just have one image on them filling the whole canvas, that's not necessarily the case. They can have multiple images, they can have choices of images, they can have audio, they can have video, they can have all of these things together, all mixed up. And really, especially if you're building an interface that's just parsing or displaying manifests or canvases that you might be throwing at it without really having much of an idea what might be on them, it's very hard to render something if you don't know what's on it. If you want to, nice to have a component that just renders a canvas no matter what is coming along. And there's also all the other information on the canvas, all the annotations and so on. We want to render those too. So what does it look like? It's just a tag. This is very similar, in fact, to the React tags that we saw on Ramp yesterday. But this is a HTML5 web component, so it's not even React. It's kind of neutral, library neutral. And basically, you set the manifest. You also need to set a canvas ID, usually because mostly canvases aren't dereferenceable. So you need to give it a manifest and the canvas you want, but nothing unusual here, just deep seeing. But what about a canvas that is a bit more complicated than that? So if we look at a cookbook recipe, the familiar example, this example that I'm sure you've all seen before, like we might not have even known that that was going on in the canvas, but it doesn't matter. We just pass it the Canvas Panel and it can composite the two images together and just render it. Now, what we've seen there is a viewport, like as if we'd use OpenSeaDragon or Leaflet. But we also have these modes called presets where we can say, don't render as a viewport with control ceded to the user, render as a responsive image, for example. So by setting the responsive preset with the same parameters, we can say, all right, you're not going to behave like a deep zoom thing. You're just a responsive image, and you're going to adjust yourself to whatever HTML layout is going on here. And it's just a static image at that stage. So as I'm adjusting the width of the DOM there, the image is being a responsive image and adjusting nicely for me. And when it's doing that kind of thing, just rendering static images, it's being a bit clever and taking notice of any sizes that are advertised on the image service and using them where possible to optimize, because it's likely that you're going to serve those sizes quicker. So if you're building interfaces that have lots of images in them, or thumbnails and stuff, Canvas Panel can be a good way of doing that. It can also have a region parameter to select a particular region of the canvas. And that allows us to use Canvas Panel to kind of build UI, such as, here's a kind of print example, but if you wanted to do that in HTML with Canvas panel, it's pretty easy. You just kind of just use it like an image tag, really, in the responsive mode. And it can also load a content state, and that might be the more typical way of using it. Rather than having the two parameters, we can say a content state, which might be a particular region, a particular canvas, in a particular manifest. So far we've seen declarative stuff, but how am I programming this? What if I just have a Canvas panel tag on the page and I want to kind of script how I load stuff into it? Well, that's just the same. Is that working? Yeah. So here I have a tag, and if I look at the script behind this, I'm doing exactly the same thing as I was with the parameters. I'm just loading in a manifest and a canvas and then setting it, and it's working. But I also have this concept of targets, so I can manipulate the display. So here in this example, I am loading a canvas, focusing on a region, moving to another region, and then moving with a transition to a further region. And this code is actually quite straightforward because it's using these target properties with kind of transitions between them. So this would allow us to build kind of stories that navigate from annotation to annotation, for example. And there's not a great deal of code in this example. I won't go into great detail, but yeah, it's really just quite simple to kind of drive the viewport around. Now we have this concept in Canvas panel of an annotation display. So the annotations are there as data, but if we want to make them visible, we need to wrap an annotation in an annotation display, which kind of is a stylable element, can be kind of accessed, or is amenable to CSS. So in this example, we're drawing 3 annotations. We're putting 3 annotations on the canvas, and then we're wrapping them in different annotation displays, which allow us to style them. And in fact, on the third one here, we're giving it a hyperlink, so you can click on it. What about choices? So again, here's another example where there's a third parameter here, the ID of the body of the choice that we want selected. So here I'm manipulating which choice, natural light or X-ray, is being shown on this example. And here I'm just manipulating it declaratively in the tag, but I could do it programmatically and use that programmatic display to build, say, a simple blending interface. Again, this is just not many lines of code to do this, but I'm able to use the kind of events and the data model of Canvas panel and the way it exposes the choices to me and exposes events to me to allow me to build a kind of blending UI and not a great deal of code. So you can see here, this is quite a cool example because in the X-ray layer, you can see that in this painting, there was originally a ring of skulls around John Dee there, who's an alchemist and magician. What about accessibility? So what Canvas panel is useful for is it will make use of things like labels and other text in the IIIF and expose that as labels and other accessibility elements. But it's also fully, it makes available all the alt and ARIA label by role and title attributes. So we can programmatically assign whatever accessibility attributes we want to the Canvas panel element, and that will expose them up to the DOM and then to accessibility technologies. But I think there's a kind of, this is interesting because I was in the Fun with IIIF talk yesterday. One of the segments made use of the quality parameter, which we always use as default. But with Canvas panel, you could actually take advantage of that and mix in, this isn't implemented yet, this is just a suggestion, mix in the kind of media queries in the browser. It's like, does this user prefer high contrast? Well, maybe let's not ask for default.jpg. Let's ask for bitonal.jpg, or let's ask, let's even have custom quality parameters or image servers that support different accessibility needs. And so whereas the ones yesterday were for fun, these may be actually really helpful to people because, for example, you could say if someone has prefers contrast, you could render the text like that, or render the OCR text available from the image. This is all very well, but is this actually being used? Yes, the Canvas panel is financed by the Getty, and here it is being used at the Getty. And in this example, so on these museum collection pages, the viewer is entirely built with Canvas panel, and it's making use of the fact that on some of these images, so here is just kind of typical viewer like layouts, again, all driven by Canvas panel, but on some of these pages, there are alternative views because there are choice elements on some of the image annotation, the painting annotations, and we can flip them around and turn them around. And this is just using Canvas panel's API to expose these behaviors and just kind of make the transitions happen on the page. And we can do that by selecting the menu or by clicking. So yeah, so it works and it's in use, and many thanks to the Getty for financing the development of this component. I've actually finished because that was quite a quick presentation.
We're going to do Q&A again at the end, like we've done for the other sessions. So, okay, so next up is Jacob Hart, who's going to be talking about Arvest, multi-user IIIF-driven environment for multimodal document analysis. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. First of all, let me thank the organisers of this great event for welcoming us to Los Angeles. I'm really happy to be here. My name is Jacob Hart. I'm currently a postdoctoral researcher at Rennes University in France, and today I'm going to be talking to you about a tool we've been developing called Arvest. So Arvest is intended to be a fully functional, fully open source, multi-user IIIF-driven environment that allows for the analysis of multimodal documents. So today I'll start by going over what the tool is, outline its major functionalities, and also talk about some of the case studies that have been shown in the development. So very quickly, let me just introduce the team. And development is currently being carried out by Dirk, a team of developers and Grenoble specialised in open source software. The project also falls under a bigger European Research Council funded project called Stage, led by Clarisse Bardiot, started this year and will allow us to develop and maintain the tool for at least the next 5 years. So what is Arvest? So you may be familiar with Bush's Emacs, which is the idea of a mechanical device that will allow a person to access a large collection of books and documents with ease, the main being a combination of the words memory and expansion. And we imagine Arvest in a similar way, but in the digital domain, as a virtual desktop or workstation that will allow the user to do a multitude of things with collections of digital documents. And user profiles, historians and analysts, although we'll see possibilities for other cases earlier. So the user can replace a collection of documents from their desks, but not just text. So Arvest is intended to be fully multimodal, allowing us to manipulate textual documents, images, video, and 3D objects. So that's very simple, expressing powerful operation. Is to arrange them differently on the desktop, viewing them from various models and rapidly comparing them in a space. Like at a real desk, we can grab a highlighter or a transparent overlays and start annotating documents, draw attention to certain aspects. We can also create links between the different documents that are on the desk and group them together according to varying characteristics. Next, we can pick up our scissors and glue, start chopping documents up, sticking them together, composing new documents made up of regions of old ones. When doing this, it's of course important not to forget where these fragments came from and to keep them in context and not lose the link to the original source. We can also grab our calculator or perhaps a neural network and start performing operations like classifications, statistical calculations, and creating different visualizations of the data contained in these documents. So on our desk, we can quickly jump from what we in the digital humanities call a close reading approach, from inspecting document in its detail, to a distant reading approach where we model and graph a whole collection. Next, we can let the researchers see our desk and allow them to completely reconfigure the collection in a way that answers their specific research questions. And we can configure the collection across different dimensions, so it's spatial by placing documents in different corners of the desk, or temporal by stacking things up in different orders. And finally, we take our configuration, our currency will change them at important than the rates of story. So we think that it's not only important for things like communication, but it's also a useful tool for researchers that allows them to keep track of the operations and transformations that they may have performed. So this is what we wish to do with Arvest, bringing time-tested methods from history, physics, and new possibilities offered by technologies into one digital space. So I'm sure everyone is aware IIIF is the perfect framework to support this kind of approach, and with the recent inclusion of audiovisual time-based media into the presentation API, it presented itself as a natural candidate for us to base Arvest. So, here is the prototype. We have the pleasure of presenting our prototype at last year's IIIF conference, then under the working name of the Memo Recall IIIF. So Memo Recall is a video annotation tool created by Crane Bardiot that's existed since 2015, and Arvest is somewhat of a spiritual successor to it. So our main contribution last year was to implement video and audio playback within Mirador, and also a plugin for video annotations. Since then, development of both Arvest and Mirador has much progressed. So we've driven the development of a number of case studies and also a workshop at the Reimagining Annotation for Multimodal Cultural Heritage Conference held in Rennes last February. I'll take you through where the tool is now, some of the work we've done this year, and finish by explaining our plans for the future, and let you know how you can get involved. So how does Arvest exist physically, and what can we do with it? So here's a diagram that shows all of the key components, and I'll take you through each of them step by step. So first of all, we propose a multi-user environment that is built using the web framework Django. Now, please bear in mind that this is very much work in progress, and we intend to do a full GUI overhaul, but videos I'll be sharing will give you an idea about what this looks like towards the end of the year. So hosted by anybody with an email and an internet connection will be able to create some gap free, start using Arvest and creating IIIF content. So we feel that one barrier using IIIF is the technical skills that are needed, running servers, creating a JSON format manifest, etc. So non-technical users can have a hard time either investing considerable time into learning these skills or paying people for the service of setting up a user-friendly, closed interface for their institutional research projects. Because this multi-user environment, individuals and institutions can start using IIIF with all of the hard stuff taken care of. And in the environment, we also offer storage space for all kinds of media, including an instance of PHU for large audiovisual documents. And this, of course, doesn't take away from the fact that users can import all the already available IIIF format content that already exists online. And now to the nature of the projects themselves. So the working environment is based on a core Mirador that we've been working on since last year that allows for playback audio-visual content. As you should be aware, Mirador recently put much effort into updating to the latest versions of React and Material UI, and we also poured considerable time into keeping our report in line with these changes. This form is augmented with an image annotation plugin, which is compatible with this latest version of Mirador. And I'll take this opportunity to say that, of course, all these different modules are available open source on GitHub, so if you're interested in just one aspect, then please feel free to pick that from there. And also a shout out to our colleagues at Harvard, to David Flood, at the Art and Humanities Research Institute, who are also this plugin. And finally, we have another plugin which allows the user to annotate audio-visual content in a variety of ways. So these annotations can range from text-based notes and tags to overlays of text, shapes, and images, and annotations that link to other IIIF manifests, which we'll see in just a moment. So all of the annotations, when applied to time-based media, a specific region and time of the resource. And there's also an expert mode which allows you to directly edit the JSON format of the annotation if you wish to do that. So the idea behind Arvest is that you're really creating and navigating a network of interlinked documents of varying formats. So this is notably permitted by the aforementioned annotations that are linked to other manifests, which allow the user to fluidly jump between documents and perspectives and create powerful data-driven interfaces as demonstrated here. And finally, we wish to fully integrate Arvest into machine learning-driven workflows. So this is initially allowed for by the creation of a RESTful API that lies across the system and will allow developers to perform any kind of operation like accessing media, creating manifests, and creating annotations from afar. So to make things simpler, we are working on an open library of Python notebooks, which can be run with Colab, where we take you step by step through any number of operations from simply adding media Arvest to creating annotated manifests from speech recognition algorithms and image embedding projections. So one of our long-term goals is to inspect how we can bring these possibilities to a less technical user base. But in the meantime, I think that an open API is a great first step. And then, of course, the final aspect of all this is, of course, we need to share these projects with the world in an interoperable format, possibilities for precise citation, union of viewers, and all the other wonderful functionalities provided by IIIF. So a quick word on some of the case studies we've been working on this year that have really been driving development both in terms of functionality but also in terms of interface. So a number of smaller projects and experimentation. So there are 3 major case studies that we've been working on that each have from different disciplines and domains. So the first is the COSO project, which was the Horizon 2025 project around citizen science. This was the case study that notably drove the development of the prototype and focused on the collaborative project between a contemporary dancer and a philosopher. And we used Arvest to track their creative process and also assess the nature of their collaboration. So with this study, we could experiment with Arvest as an environment for taking a collection of traces from the creative process and see how we could draw information pertaining to collaboration through network analysis and observe the elements of this network from different perspectives. Next, there is the work around Artsoid Studios, which is a centre for contemporary music creation in Valenciennes in France. So we're working with them and the large archive of past and recent artistic residencies to explore how Arvest can be a platform for artists and music lovers to preserve and notably discover content within a large collection. So using techniques like music information retrieval, optical music recognition, and neural network classification, we've been able to create an interface that allows the archive to be explored in novel ways by artists that come in residence and make it their own by re-articulating the archive through their own creative practices. And finally, we have the Plausivet project, which is led by the Maison des Sciences de l'Homme en Bretagne and the British Cinematheque. So efforts are currently underway to assess an archive of sources from a scientific project involving hundreds of researchers that focus on the population of a remote Breton village in the 60s. So the traces from this project have ended up in archives all over France, and the breadth of the archive is still unknown. So Arvest is being used to regroup this data in IIIF format and propose ways of exploring it, mostly thanks to computer vision algorithms as shown here. So there's much to be said about these case studies, and please get in touch if you'd like to learn more. And finally, the tool will be the underlying technology for the aforementioned RTC project stage that is looking to revolutionize performing art historiography, notably working on the corpus of the Avignon Festival's art. So for more information on that, check out the website, which you have linked to here. So let's talk about where things are going to go over here. So unfortunately, contrary to what was absolutely abstract, the best version of the tool isn't set to release until December of this year. So but we are hoping to officially deliver the image and annotation plugins in October. As I mentioned, however, everything is currently available on our GitHub, so you can follow progress there or follow them for repos yourself straight away. And we're still to implement the instance of PHP hosting and implement storytelling functionalities, which will mainly consist of chaining together different Miro workspace configurations As mentioned before, we intend to do a full overhaul of the GUI. So you can find the links to the GitHub, which are in the QR code that I'll be displaying in just a moment. And we're going to find the links to everything we talked about today. I'd like to say that we're really open to collaboration. If you have ideas or things you'd like to work on with us, then please get in touch. In the next couple of weeks, we'll also be opening a discourse forum where people can sign up and chat about the tool, their projects, and we'll also be people posting progress. And in the meantime, you can visit our website for news and updates, which you can just see. So thank you so much for your time, and have a great conference.
Thank you, Jacob, very much. It's really interesting work. Okay, so next up, this presentation was originally going to be given by Diego, Pino, and Navarro, who unfortunately can't attend. So we've got Allison and Sherrick, who's going to be presenting on transdimensional mutations for audio, moving media, annotations, and IIIF and such.
Hi everyone, I'm Allison Sherrick. I'm the Digital Projects and Services Manager at the Metropolitan New York Library Council. This photo in the middle is Diego Pino Navarro, my colleague at Metro. He's the Director of Digital Strategy at Metro and also Archipelago's lead architect. And he is responsible for a lot of the code and maps that you're about to see, so blame him for anything strange there. And then this is our new logo, also drawn by Diego, who's multi-talented for the Archipelago software that we use. So Archipelago is an open source repository software that has the development home at Metro. Archipelago is
From
a very
that Thursday to
system.
Sunday, however, there's also a bite mark show in the middle of that too, the bite mark show. Yeah. So I was thinking about going out to the desert for the 2 days, Thursday, Friday, or Friday, Saturday. And then doing that thing Sunday. But this is all dependent on my work schedule too. What? Yes. Sorry.
Did it stop? I can't. Okay, all right. If he's going out for a bike ride in the desert, that sounds amazing. Okay, sorry for that. So Archipelago is a very JSON forward system. For every Archipelago digital object, there is a JSON field or a JSON blob attached. We call this the strawberry field. You're going to see a lot about strawberries in this presentation, so that's just a little bit of our naming convention. Archipelago itself has a flexible open schema metadata approach, and we have standard templates and displays provided, and IIIF integrations woven throughout. This presentation, I'm going to be walking through Archipelago's post-processing pipeline that extracts textual values from subtitle transcript BTT files and transforms them into time and space-based dimensions to enable searching within Mirador. This process uses Archipelago's Strawberry Runner's post-processing module. This is a newly minted module that uses a custom plugin dedicated to subtitle and transcript file transmutation, moving these values, transforming the values in multiple ways that you're going to see in a few minutes. Everything is converted natively into W3C compliant annotations for the internal IIIF Content Search APIs. If you want to learn more about Archipelago's integration of the IIIF Content Search APIs, Diego and I were fortunate to have a short lightning talk at the most recent IIIF Midwinter and online meeting, and there's the video recording is available on the IIIF YouTube. This approach that you're seeing in the presentation allows us to reuse the OCR highlight plugin, which is developed by the wonderful Bavarian State Library team, which we already use in Archipelago for our normal textual annotations of image-based resources for traditional OCR. And also this approach allows us to use all the supporting code that drives our processing workflows and discovery configurations. Step by step for this process, what happens first is, of course, you start with a digital object with your audio file or video files and your BTT or SRT files, whatever format you're using, those are ingested into your archipelago. Then the Strawberry Runners post-processing module kicks in and passes the VTT file or files, the data into the background pipeline. For every VTT file present in the pipeline, the temporal dimensions, the time codes in that file, are transmuted into spatial coordinates at X and Y. Then these new coordinates are encoded and stored as discoverable OCR in the mini-OCR format, and indexed into the backend Solr server. Last step, during the end user searches, custom processor transforms those textual queries as needed against the Solr documents, then targets the results in the correct time in the IIIF manifest and jumps the Mirador viewer forward to the results. Just a quick look at this in action. There's a short video at the end. Right here we have use of a standard Mirador 3 and 4 viewer. This is Mirador 4, I believe, in this screenshot. We use the standard Mirador that's available. We don't have any custom forks, but we do tap into Mirador externally to override some default behavior to enable a little bit of jumping in the playback. Part of the reason for this, it was to permit a little bit of an offset, like a 100 millisecond offset, so that when a user goes to the point where the textual like that particular text that they're searching for starts, they actually have a little bit of a lead in. That's pretty normal when you're navigating transcripts. Just because if it goes directly to it, then it sometimes goes past it and the user doesn't see that it was the result that they're looking for. We also use a customized IIIF presentation API 3.0 manifest template, and we set the VTT files within annotations. A little note here, you can't see it in the screenshot, but there is multi-track support for different languages or versions of your subtitles or transcript. So if you, in the bottom corner of the viewer, if you change the subtitle track to one in a different language, that's the language that you're going to be searching for. So just something to note. And though this is a video screenshot of the video, this also works for audio files. Okay, this is the fun part, or the not so fun part. How you transform your textual VTT data on the left to the XML mini OCR data on the right. That is a screenshot of the from Fullmetal Alchemist, which is my favorite anime, and that is Ed's transmutation circle. I originally wanted to do the hand signals that he does, but it looked crazy, so I decided not to do it. That's a fun show, if anybody is interested. Okay, so a little bit about what is needed to transform your those time codes and line by line, how you have to think about this. In traditional OCR, you have bounding boxes that place the coordinates of the text within the larger canvas. When you have a VTT file, of course, if you think about it, you could just, there's no dimensions to it. It's just straight text. So you have to do some calculations to place it within a canvas for this whole process, and to get move it into the mini OCR format, which also has those kind of a bounding box coordinates, if you think about it. For this, Diego and I had to have some very fun discussions about how many words would fit on a page, what words or what size page we would base some of these transformations on. And so this file, if you look at it within the Strawberry Runners module, you will see some notes throughout that describe the calculations that were made and some of these assumptions that this is based on. And also, as part of this process, we had to input some checks against the VTT files to validate the time encoding, because there is variance in the wild within VTT files for the timestamps formatting, also for SRTs, even more for SRTs. So that's something to be aware of if you're working with that. Most of our repository partners happen to use WebVTT, which is great because it's a little bit more standardized, a little less loose. So this is the regular expression that will check and make sure that the time stamps in the VTT file are valid. The actual valid times, it's very easy. A lot of VTTs are hand transcribed, so it's very easy for there to be a little bit like a missing zero or a trailing zero, that kind of thing. So this regular expression checks for that. Okay, now your data has been transformed and everything is indexed into Solr, and this is just a screenshot from our Solr. It's a little boring, but you can see that there's multiple copies and versions of this file and this data. And then after it's in Solr, when a user executes a query, the query is passed back through a JMeS path to target the correct annotations in the manifest. This snippet of the JMeS path is right there at the top, and then this is just showing how it is validated against the manifest, and then the output on the right hand side where you can see that VTT annotation triad targeting the results. That's the results list of the response. Now that result is finally passed back to Mirador, and there's a few extra pushes from our the archipelago modified version of Mirador.js. This is a very long section. It's cut off here, but there's that's where the extra logic is if you have any interest in looking at it. And now I'm just going to show a short video. Yes. And I'm just searching for video, and you can see the results list. You can see how it starts a little offset and then goes to that, and then navigates through the list of results. And that's about it. Sorry. So thank you, everyone. This is our GitHub repository and a link to a few of the submodules so you can find the different code and releases, and they're noted throughout. And then also this is linked to our documentation site where we have documentation related to this whole post-processing pipeline and how it works. So thank you, everyone.
Great, thank you, Allison. Okay, so next up, we've got Hennie Brugman, who's going to be presenting publishing and annotating text and images in large historical handwritten text recognition collections. Thank you so much.
Hi, I'm Hennie Brugman. I'm from the Humanities Cluster of the Royal Academy of Sciences in Amsterdam in the Netherlands. We do a number of projects concerning quite large historical HTR collections, and we're going to talk a bit about that. There are good reasons why we do HTR. One is that we want to use the text as kind of index into the image material, but probably a more important reason is that we are more interested in the text than in the images themselves. So in many of our cases, people, even if they have the text, they don't even care too much about the images. So I want to shift the focus of my talk a bit towards text, so text-driven versus image-driven. So the projects that we work on is, for example, the Globalize project, which is dealing with 5 million scanned pages from the National Archives of the Netherlands. It scans from the VOC archive, the Dutch East India Company. This is fully HDR'd using Transcribus and Lodi, which is an in-house built kind of equivalent for Transcribus. That we use a lot and co-develop with the National Archive at the moment. We also work on a quite different type of textual collections, namely digital scholarly editions that are often represented in TEI XML. That's kind of the other extreme of what we try to address with the same approach and the same tooling. And the projects that I want to use as an illustration in my talk today, that is the Republic project. And the Republic project concerns 200 years of resolutions of the Dutch Parliament, the Dutch States General. It's from the 16th and 17th century, And it's about 500,000 scanned pages, also from the National Archive, of which 400,000 are handwritten and about 100,000 are printed. This covers about 1 million decisions of Parliament over a period of 60,000 meeting days. So this shows some examples from the collection, a handwritten one and a printed one. And let's see what's on this pages. So first of all, I see text that you want to read in a specific order. This text is in columns. So you read a column, you go to the next column, and you probably want to read the next page as well. So there's reading order issues going on. And there's also marked regions on the scans, which have some meaning if you know how to read this text. So the semantics concern. So for example, dates, they indicate the beginning of a meeting, a meeting day. And typically this meeting day starts with a list of attendance. And this is followed by a list of text blocks that are individual resolutions. And in turn, these resolutions also have parts like an introduction, so which is the problem, what is the problem to be discussed, and there's a conclusion, there's a decision that is made. So we have to do a lot of processing to make this all nicely accessible. The first step is, for example, that we automatically classify all the pages in a volume. A volume is roughly a book containing all the notes from 1 year. And we managed to classify the pages, determine their page type. What we do next is we focus on the resolution pages, for example, and then we address reading order issues. So we concatenate the text of these pages up to the level of a volume. And then we do segmentations in an automatic way, trying to identify individual chunks that are relevant, that I have shown, the session days, the resolutions. And then we do further processing like detection of named entities and complex forms of named entities. So this is what it looks like. So on the left is concatenated text for a volume, and what you see is a slice of this text. It's line by line, scan line by scan line. It's based on the scan lines of the HDR. And you see numbers in front. These are the line numbers that we use as an index or coordinate into this text. And this is nicely a slice out of a year of decisions. All information, other information we represent as standoff annotations. So, for example, text regions are typically columns here. So we can point at the column, we can point at the columns as a section of the text. The same for pages, and there's typically 2 pages on a scan, so also scans. So all the boundaries of these elements, we know where they are in the stream of text lines. We can go on. So we have automatic segmentation processes, where we can also do more at the semantic level. We can detect the boundaries in this text stream, like the individual resolutions, but also these attendance lists with individual attendance, paragraphs, session days, stuff like that. Also represented as annotations. And as you see, it's all parallel and overlapping annotations. And that's quite nice because we can exploit the overlap quite nicely. So we know, given a resolution, we know on which page it is or on which 2 consecutive pages it is. Or the other way around. For a page, we can easily check out what resolutions are on the page. You also can see that because there's lots of parallel annotations, that these annotations cover the same text. So one line of text can be covered by multiple annotations. So we don't want to duplicate all these texts. And so we want to address this text by reference. Can go one step further, that's what we have in mind, is that we also want to support, or the model also supports user-defined annotation types with their own semantics. There's nothing in the way. It's all standoff, so you can easily add your own layers with your own meaning. So now how do we represent this or this abstract model with text and annotations? Of course, with the IIIF and web annotations. So on the lower left, this is the way you see it often. So you take a scanned page and you have targets for each image part, and you have targets and you associate each part of the image with a text that's in that part. But that didn't suit us quite well, because we don't want to address a couple of lines from a resolution. We want to point at resolutions. So what we do is we have web annotations for example, a resolution. And this web annotation has both image targets and it has a text target. And in the body, we put information about the resolution. So for example, that it is a resolution, a subtype of a web annotation, and what metadata is associated with it. So web annotation roughly looks a bit like this. It's a package with all information concerning, for example, resolution. And it has an identifier, which is a resolvable URL to the web annotation itself. I can put this in Slack or in email and send it to you, and you have all the information of this resolution in the collection. It has a body, which defines a kind of subtype for the web annotation, namely in this case, that it is a resolution. And depending on the type, it also has a block of metadata. So all kinds of specific information concerning resolutions. And in the targets, we have this image targets and text targets. So all these links resolve. So clearly the image links are standard IIIF image API links, so they resolve the parts of images. But also the text links resolve. And so I put it in here. So you have a URL, and if it's resolved, the text of this resolution is returned, even if it is in over multiple pages. So I replicated this link above, and you see that it has some similarities with the IIIF image API, and that's what we have in mind. We are working towards kind of an analog for text, mimicking what IIIF does for images. So we have some requirements for that. We have the first version, we use it for our project, but we want to make a proper one, which is generically usable and not dependent on the system where it's part of, etc. So we wanted to support the different coordinate granularities. We already need that now. So I showed a granularity of scan lines, but we also have cases where we have tokens as granularity or paragraphs or characters. And we have to do that simultaneously and connected sometimes. So we have different coordinate systems with different granularities that we want to support. We also are confronted with alternative texts, so like translations, or if we want to search properly or have a readable version, we want to concatenate text lines and fix the line breaks so that we don't miss things that are broken off when we search, for example. And at the same time, the users want to see this line-by-line representation side by side with the scan. So we need them both. So we need text coordinates, and we want them to be enumerable because we want to address segments and combinations of character counts or whatever that this simply doesn't scale. So it has to be enumerable, and we want it to be comparable because we want to exploit this overlapping relations. We avoid including semantics in this text API because we want semantics to be mixed in a separate way. And I already said we wanted to be compatible with IIIF. So I see that there are efforts going on concerning geographic information systems, including 3D. And I would love it if text would also be taken up somehow by the community and lead to some form of standardization of such an API. So the architecture, we'll go quickly over this. So this is what we built. So on the bottom, there's repository systems for 3 types of information. This Pergamon images is simply a IIIF image server. We have a text repository implementing this text referencing API. But we also have an annotation repository storing all the web annotations that we have, and that's up to hundreds of thousands, up to millions or so. No, I have to be correct. It's 10 million to 100 million. Everything is generic. Oh, sorry, I should have told that, but I'm running a bit out of time, so I'm speeding up. There's a middleware layer where everything that is project specific and web orchestration stuff goes in. So we can handle different cases just by changing the configuration at this middleware level. So one of the components that we have is an annotation repository that resolves the web annotation links, but it supports, it's a full implementation of the W3C web annotation protocol, plus some extra features, batch upload, authentication, but we also added the possibility to search for overlapping text annotation. And to conclude, what we are after for the near and a bit further future is this stabilized version of a text referencing API. And of course, we hope that once this is settled, that we have a working full implementation of it. We want to integrate other media types like audiovisual and historical maps. And we want to start working on manual annotation support, because our vision is that what we call a shared annotation space is that we publish, as a collection providers, we publish all our information as annotations on coordinate systems, on canvases, and the same canvas can in principle be used by the outside world, by everybody who wants to do something with our collection. So we hope that sharing these annotation spaces will stimulate new types of scholarly collaboration. Thank you.
Thank you, Hennie. That's great. Excellent. Okay, so our last presentation before we move into Q&A. So next up, we have Dominique, who's going to be presenting the feminist art of integration, Judy Chicago's archives and IIIF. Welcome, Dominique.
Hi, good morning. Is that my time or someone else's? Am I already out of time? Good morning. So just so you know, I am very Southern, so if you don't speak back to me, I won't know what's going on. Hi, good morning. My name is Dominique. I am invited here on behalf of Penn State, where I've been brought in as a metadata archivist. So let me clarify, I'm a metadata archivist. I'm an archivist. I'm an archivist. So if you have very specific questions about the technical applications that we're going to talk about today, I may need to refer you to my colleague, but I'm more than happy to take your questions as we go through the presentation. I'm here to talk to you about the Judy Chicago Research Portal. Can you hear me okay? You can't. Thank you. I'm here to talk to you about the Judy Chicago Research Portal. Judy Chicago is a contemporary feminist artist. If you haven't heard of her, I would highly encourage you to look her up. Currently, she has some shows that are being installed and will be up in France in the next couple of days to about a week. But if you are interested, if you're an art enthusiast in any way, I would recommend that you check out her work. The research portal was originally a partnership between 3 major institutions, which I'm going to talk about in just a second, but it is essentially a research portal where a variety of Judy Chicago's material that is kind of spread out among multiple institutions, kind of actually all over the world, but this specific portal looks at institutions in the United States, is kind of coming together using IIIF to create one research platform for students, scholars, and it's currently hosted at Penn State. Whereas, as you can see, our partners here at the bottom also include Nevada Museum of Art and Judy Chicago's studio. So, as I said, the founding partners are Penn State University Libraries, Nemois, which stands for the National Museum of Women in the Arts in Washington, D.C., and the Schlesinger Library at Harvard. More recent partners have included University of Nevada and Nevada Museum of Art and the Jordan Schnitzer Family Foundation. I always get Schnitzer name. It's a little hard for me to say. We also have worked closely with Through the Flower, which is Judy Chicago's foundation, and Megan Schultz, which is who's the head manager of Judy Chicago's studio in New York. But here are the majority of our partners, as including a few more who I'll talk about in just a sec. Specifically today, I'm here kind of talking on behalf of the Penn State team of the, initiative. And our team includes Binky Lush, who is typically the person who gives these presentations. Karen Schwenter, Linda Ballinger, Verity Wang, who is our undergraduate intern, and Faru, who is our social media extravaganza, graphic designer, wonderful person. So initially, the idea for the portal started in 2016, and it was in discussion with Penn State University Library's previous dean, Barbara Dewey, and the director of NMWA, the National Museum of Women in the Arts, and the former director of the Schlesinger. In addition to, there was also a Penn State professor who was an art education professor, and they had worked very closely with Judy Chicago's work over the years in their classrooms, and was looking for a way to better incorporate her archival material into their educational curriculum, but looking for a reasonable way in 2016 to do that. Each of the institutions had very different portions of Judy's work and materials kind of spread out. So for example, Penn State holds the majority of her curriculum-based work, whereas the Schlesinger at Harvard held the majority of her actual project, documentation about her projects. And NMWA in DC held the art objects themselves. So when you're dealing with an artist, you have the art, any documentation that the artist has made about their art, and then any additional secondary curriculum work that any professors, university faculty, whomever may have developed in explaining or distribution of that work. The original vision was to connect these three original institutions and collections by juxtaposing the material that they each held in different collections together, and then presenting them to researchers and educators in new and innovative ways, allowing students and scholars to ask different probing questions of the material by kind of placing objects in view or next to or in exchange of different objects. At the time, this was going to be a quite unique and collaborative, and maybe even today, would be a quite unique and collaborative process between institutions bringing together a major art museum, so the National Museum of Women in the Arts, an Ivy League institution, Schlesinger, which is at Harvard, and a major land grant institution. So you have very different institutions with very different policies, politics, interpersonal things, all trying to find a way to work together across different library systems. They all had different dams. Still to this day, they all have different dams. Just trying to pull a lot of things together. What's unique about this approach and what's unique about the project to this day is that it is still, it was and is still led entirely by women technologists and women creatives working collaboratively together to kind of make this work. So the first iteration of the portal was actually just a website. It was a website to kind of lay the groundwork of what the intention of the work was, so that it was a very open and collaborative process, so that there was plenty of opportunity for feedback for other people who were familiar with Judy's work to participate or to comment. It also included a small sample of items that would be featured from the various institutions on the site. This collaboration was in place for quite a while, actually, while this site was up. On the back end, the team started working on what I'll show you as to be phase 2. In this particular iteration, the sample size included maybe 5 to 10 examples of digitized content from each institution. So getting into phase 2, this is really where the IIIF stuff started to come in a little bit stronger. As I said on the previous site, it was simply more of a static website. Here, now you're starting to get the research portal. This, if you were to Google the Judy Chicago research portal, what you're going to see is a very, very similar iteration of this site to date. We're currently working on phase 3, but I'll talk about that in just a second. The development of phase 2 included the surveying of examples from all the other portal partners to see what other portals and partnerships were doing. They wanted to very much understand what worked and what wasn't working when institutions of different sizes, of different capacities, and of different resource iterations were working together, what they looked like, and how we could, or how the portal could do something similar, or not. They also worked to establish how they would plan to work by organizing the material, organizing the artwork by themes, by categories. When you're dealing with artwork, understanding the artist's intentions and working in bodies of work is very important. And so there was a lot of planning involved with how they were going to actually organize the works so that it made sense for the artist and it made sense for the end user. There was a development of a simple common schema that was based on very simple Dublin core and worked with each one of the original 3 partners to implement. They also started, as I said, working with and implementing IIIF protocol, which actually included at the time pulling thumbnail images so that none of the actual objects were stored on the portal. And also when you're dealing with institutions, some being private, some being public, some being state funded, there was just a lot of conversation of how to do that and what objects were going to land where, who was going to hold which things. So the result or the conclusion that was come to at the time was to actually just kind of link to thumbnails on each repository partner's platform separately, and then link into the original portal. At the time, the portal, when it was first designed, was only pulling 50 objects from each partner because at the time they thought that was what they could handle. They thought that's how far the technology had advanced, that's what we could do. Eventually, that moved up to about 400, and that presented its own challenges. So in 2020, I will add, as we go kind of to the next portion, in 2020, the portal added the Nevada Museum of Art, as well as the Judy Chicago Studio, kind of as its 4th and 5th kind of partners. And this increased their capacity for images, I don't know, probably about 3 or 4-fold. And we needed to find a new ways to address scale, usability, UI, and UX. Here we are currently in phase 3. In phase 3, we've actually decided to expand the project so that it includes objects from all Judy Chicago objects from all of the partners, regardless of size and scale. So some of the partners had maybe a few objects. Some partners have hundreds, if not thousands, of objects. That produces a kind of scale issue of how we were going to pull material into the portal, but we're currently working on that. Kind of as each partner has bandwidth. So just because partner A has a substantial amount of staff and bandwidth this year, that partner B may be working on a grant this year and can't get to it till next year. And so we have quarterly meetings to kind of address and understand where everyone is so that we can get as much material from their repositories into the portal as possible, which includes them digitizing it, includes creating metadata, it includes a lot of steps. And so we kind of worked collaboratively every quarter to do that. As a part of phase 3, we've also developed a refined and revised metadata schema in which we've actually tried to flatten the hierarchy due to the technical constraints. As you can imagine, when you're dealing with 5 different DAMs, 3 of which are IIIF compliant, 2 of which are not, you're dealing with a great deal of just distancing. And so we tried to create a new and revised metadata platform that kind of flattens that hierarchy a little bit, making it a little more technically advantageous for us to work with. We also worked with Penn State students to help them redesign the website with minds towards our user audience, and bringing on really amazing graphic design graduate students to kind of help us do more things, more visually appealing things. So I'm going to kind of go through a couple of challenges that we've had as we're developing phase 3. The first being different scales and schedules. As I mentioned before, we have 5 different institutions with 5 different priorities. Some are federal, some are private, some are land grant. It can be a little bit of a mess, but it's kind of a beautiful mess that we all kind of really like. And so some, as I mentioned, some partners have as few as 400 objects, some partners have as many as 4,000. And so there's just a complexity to getting everything together. Some of our partners just don't simply even have their material digitized, much less available online. Some of it has all of it digitized and all of it online. Some, as I mentioned, are not IIIF compliant. Some are working in very old DAMS systems. And so just scales and schedules and priorities has probably been one of our main issues. Another challenge is content curation. Originally, like I said, we had 50 objects from each partner. Now we're scaling up, but as times and schedules allow, different partners have different priorities of what they're going to digitize at what times and scales. And so we have to kind of understand what their priorities for digitization are, so that we can meet their metadata needs, so that we can meet other needs, so we can get the material into the portal, and that the portal can continuously be updated. Another challenge that I wanted to mention when dealing with the representation of art objects is that sometimes you have, say, for example, in the top image, you have a documentation about an art object that gets categorized, and the metadata creation for that object can look very different than from the bottom image, which is actually the art object. So cataloging, and as you can see, obviously it's the same photograph, but this is what the bottom is what is actually displayed in the gallery. And so even in the catalog or in the portal, when you're searching through, we had to find a way to differentiate between what is a work of art and what is the work about a work of art. And so creating new metadata schemas to make sure that we could figure that out. So kind of last two things here, other technical things that we were kind of pushing through. As I mentioned, the amount of material just simply increased, and we needed to figure out figure out ways that make sense for us to categorize each object. And then I'll go to the next one here. Specifically, I wanted to leave on a note around challenges that we had around IIIF. Specifically, the challenge is simply that not all of our partners actually were using IIIF compliant DAMS systems. And so that created a way in which we're not even almost even speaking similar languages. And so kind of streamlining all of that and conveying that necessity to even to myself as a less technical fluent person, and getting that compliancy into the thumbnails and into our portal was quite a challenge. We currently now link to each repository as they are able. And for those that are not compliant or those that still are developing their DAMs, those thumbnails are hosted at Penn State through a IIIF manifest. Last thing I'll note is that working collaboratively with 5 different partners from across the country with different needs and priorities requires a great deal of flexibility, especially when you're working with something quite technical, with archivists, librarians, scholars, artists, who may not have the same technical expertise. So it's been quite a learning curve for me in working with this project. And so if I could offer any takeaway, it would just be to increase flexibility, increase openness and collaborative efforts, so that everyone can kind of get a seat at the table or tear down the table. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Dominique. That's really amazing work. Okay, so we are right on time. Thank you to the speakers for staying on time. Really appreciate it.
Presentation. David Children at Jordan will be presenting another project of Microsoft. Hopefully, I rather people with students with
That's Hi, everybody. Welcome back. Can everybody hear me okay? Is that
No, is your mic off?
Where's that? Oh, there it is.
No,
All right, how about now? Better? Cool. All right. So we're going to talk a little bit about a joint project between the University of Illinois and Northwestern called Maktaba, which worked to unite 2 different collections of Arabic manuscripts into a single collection. We're just getting started with it, so we're going to walk through that. So the University of Illinois and Northwestern hold valuable collections of manuscripts from the 19th and early 20th century that represent the Islamic tradition in West Africa. Together, our libraries hold over 7,000 works in prose and verse written by African Muslims in Arabic and Ajami, which is an African language written in an adopted Arabic script. With works from Mauritania, Mali, Senegal, Nigeria, and Ghana, the collections constitute the largest set of African Arabic manuscripts available in North America. The University of Illinois houses the Buitendijk collection of Southern Mauritania, consisting of microfilm of over 2,000 Arabic manuscripts from the family of Harun al-Sidia Baba. It contains writings that reflect 4 generations of intellectual life linked to one of West Africa's premier scholarly lineages. With the owner's permission and support from an MEH grant, Professor Charles Stewart from U of I microfilmed the collection in the late 1980s and deposited them at U of I. NU's library, NU's library holds over 5,000 original Arabic manuscripts and Ajami items collected in West Africa and housed at the Herskovits collection. The goal of the Maktaba project is to open these works up to a larger community, both scholars as well as the general public. Manuscripts will be transcribed, translated, and annotated in short essays with a broad audience in mind, will be paired with the manuscripts. Maktaba, literally library in Arabic, has the goal to unite works and to open up the doors of Africa's Islamic libraries to the English-speaking world. The multidisciplinary team was brought together with a clear line between the scholarly work, translations, transcriptions, and essay content from the technical design work. The goal was to allow us to work very quickly and in parallel tracks. And the research team would be able to just focus on getting together translations as well as writing scholarly works, while we were able to pull together the technical needs. We're going to walk you through the planning and building phases of this project, but most importantly, we're going to discuss how IIIF helped us focus on our core goal of offering by offering an open standard that we could design for. The planning period will allow the project team. Oh, I'm sorry, that's not on there. All right, so first let's talk through some of the challenges. Most importantly, the collection was housed in two different institutions, so we had to pull those together. Luckily, both the institutions were IIIF adopters. Next, we quickly learned that the manuscripts were a mix of prose, works heavily annotated with marginalia, and then poetry. Specifically, poetry written and printed in idiomatic typesetting, which Matt will talk about a little bit later. Works would be translated and transcribed, and the transcriptions themselves would be annotated with more footnotes. And finally, we had to tie it all together with scholarly essays. We made the early decision to adopt the use of IIIF as the API standard around which we would base this project. It would be a test case for Canopy, which Northwestern has invested heavily in over the last year. The decision allowed us to focus on parts that made this unique rather than discussing how we would stand up and design a site.
Sure. Yeah, so at Northwestern, we like to sort of push ideas around. So Maktaba was small enough, but it had some complexities to it. And so it's like a perfect IIIF use case in that way. Really allowed us to sort of experiment with different ideas. As you can see here on this diagram, in the end, what we want to have is a IIIF collection that is called the Maktaba collection. Now, this is sort of uniting these two different collections from these two different institutions, and it's an entirely new IIIF collection, while still the manifests are still being provided from the previous collections at the various institutions. That there would be a new Maktaba collection that would unify these things and also have annotations added to them. Now, so in that way, there's sort of like an originating manifest and now a new manifest with the annotations on it. And sort of a separate way of thinking about that. In that way, it sort of like builds on sort of one of these core ideas in IIIF of reusing and remixing different types of resources. So to meet the challenges with IIIF, we need to develop a through point in which the subject matter experts could add manifests for the manuscripts, annotate these, and then finally publish the Maktaba IIIF collection. In our analysis of the manuscripts, we recognize that while many of these were prose, some were poetic meter, and as an additional complexity, we also recognized a need for footnotes to add context to this content. This brought an interesting question for us as implementers in technology and cultural heritage, like how do we map the art of text to a web annotation body? And we decided to do that by using Markdown formatting for annotations. In this way, it created sort of simple structures for us to be able to sort of build what is shown on the screen here. It is a hemistitch in couplets, which is basically each line is a verse, and this manuscript consists of 2 half-verse units. In this manuscript, there are hemistitches creating verses, and in that there are 2 half-verse units called hemistitches. So reading from right to left, there's a visual break between these, and to retain the connection of the initial and secondary hemistitches, we use Markdown to do this, specifically a list with some hierarchy. So in that, if I'm going to read this out aloud, I'm going to butcher it, but all praise belongs to God who led us. That's the first hemistitch. To the truth and away from falsehood and denied us. That would be the second half of that hemistitch. And you can sort of see that in the first verse there inside that Markdown. It's basically a list with an indented list. So while it was difficult to capture the beauty of this, we at least strive to retain some of the structure so that when we're eventually rendering this out in IIIF client, like a website, which Maktaba will, that we can then sort of interpret that and do it justice. So the workbench that the users utilize to stitch all these annotations together was built in the AWS cloud. And we built sort of a really small, almost throwaway app in order to do this. It had a simple user interface. It was not overly complex. They didn't see all the vagaries and all the complications of a manifest. All they did was sort of navigate through each of the canvases and annotate them. Users, they could securely log in. They could add a manifest. They could select the providing institution. These manifests would automatically be upgraded from presentation 2 to presentation 3. In this case, for Illinois, that was necessary. Sort of normalized our manifest structure. This used the IIIF helpers and the IIIF Commons repo that are developed by Stephen Fraser. Many thanks. Sorry he's not here. IDs would then be updated because these are new manifests, and so to be updated throughout. Because this need to be unique, and then we'd assign a provider property so that we're saying, hey, this comes from this institution, and also we would assign a see also property referencing the originating manifest. And on screen here, you can sort of see how the user is. I'm losing my cursor. There it is. On the screen here, you can sort of see. There's how a user could sort of edit that translation, bringing in the Markdown, which was converted from a Word document using Pandoc, and the subject matter just work in the text, and they didn't really have to think about IIIF. Eventually, we might need to work in different ways for these translations to be multilingual. Right now, we're assuming that the translations are just English and that the transcriptions are just Arabic. And then finally, the user would then set the manifest to public and publish the IIIF collection statically, which would be served out through an AWS endpoint. So now that we have a IIIF collection ready to go, we need a website. In the past, this would have been one of the hard parts. I myself did many of these, but we used Canopy IIIF, which is a way to stand up a lightweight website using a IIIF collection. And Canopy is a IIIF-based static site generator developed by our team at Northwestern. So you think of this as sort of like a collection viewer, but really publishes a website. And please check out Canopy or chat with me if you're curious about it. Getting back to Maktaba. So using Canopy, we created a searchable collection entirely from that IIIF collection and its direct manifests. On this example, we only have 3 manuscripts, but regardless of size, we could sort of quickly harvest these manifests, build a local search index, and then statically generate page content for those manifests. So you can sort of see in the canopy build here on the right, that the 3 manifests are being plucked out. We're building sort of a simple search index, and then we're ready to go. We have a website. This is sort of what that looks like, sort of a basic search interface. And then the user would sort of be able to use this as sort of a building block to further add context, again, using Markdown. So all the manuscripts in the Mocktail collection would now have a page automatically generated for them in the static site. On each of the pages, there's a IIIF viewer that would allow them to explore all the different canvases, read the details and the descriptive and linking properties, things like the metadata, the required statement, the original provider. And then further down the page, the fun stuff, we developed a user interface that laid out each of these canvases alongside their associated translations and transcriptions. We're really hitting on that at this conference, by the way. I like that. But coming from these manifest annotations, we rendered the textual content complete with the footnotes, again, in that markdown, and on page generation, we also created a client-side index that sort of walked through all of these different annotations, allowing the user to sort of quickly search through both the Arabic and the Latin character sets. I'm not fluent in Arabic, but it works technically. And then, so on screen, you can sort of see a user has searched for and found 3 instances for the string God, and also see the markdown footnotes. So for our scholarly content, these were not included in IIIF collection, but they referenced the manuscripts. We developed a simple pattern for the researchers. The essays were tied to the reference manuscripts by the manifest ID. It's unique. And this created a pathway for the users visiting the site to sort of navigate between the scholarly content in the essay and the manuscript page represented by that manifest. And as this was all completed in Markdown through basic front matter, we had no need for a database or complex infrastructure. So as we enter sort of our final year of this pilot grant, Mocktail is still under development. We'll share a produce site sometime in the next year. It'll only have 20 to 30 actual manuscripts in it. It's a pilot project, but we hope it eventually will contain the full 7,000. And early in this process, we began by asking a lot of questions like, is this red glyph here, is that important? Well, it turns out that's just an embellishment by the calligrapher. You might want to just note that in a footnote. And is this marginalia important? To the researchers, these answers are very apparent. But us as technologists, especially me, I must be knowledgeable that I'm naive, and I need to lead with some sort of curiosity and be malleable with things. David has said to me that, one of the worst things that we can do is make really smart people feel not so smart. And so we can easily overcomplicate our systems or omit things of importance. And these IIIF specifications, especially the presentation API, allow us to help avoid these pitfalls. And as this set of APIs grows in scope, we can perhaps use IIIF as a backbone for building lightweight, purpose-built applications like Mocktail. Thank you.
Q&A is at the end of the session. Our next speaker is Tim Zeta from Creative Commons, and he will come to talk about IIIF from a completely different angle, from using it to open culture and to enhance sharing of the data.
Greetings. So this is fostering open culture globally, synergy between Creative Commons and IIIF and cultural heritage institutions, or how I learned to stop worrying and love acronyms. My name is Timid Robot. Please call me, or Timid Robot Zeta. Please call me Timid Robot. My pronouns are they, them. I'm the Director of Technology at Creative Commons. Not with me today, but also involved in developing this presentation is Connor Benedict, the Open Culture Coordinator at Creative Commons. Creative Commons Open Cultural Program has 4 main focus areas: national and international policy work and advocacy, our legal tools, which comprise of our licenses and public domain legal tools, training, webinars, and courses, the open culture platform, and participating in events such as this. So in years past, our communities identified problematic practices in how cultural institutions were sharing public domain works. Notably, institutions were claiming works were licensed PDBY, or public domain requiring attribution. Put another way, no rights reserved, but one right reserved. The 2022 Open Culture Platform Working Group investigated and developed a number of recommended solutions to address this widespread but ill-advised practice. This year, we published new guidelines for how cultural heritage institutions can best ensure their reference when public domain material from their collections are shared or reused. In the guidelines, we give specific design ideas as well as metadata guidelines, which can be implemented within IIIF. The QR code and URL is there. These new guidelines follow the social intervention recommendation from the report. Creative Commons recommends against using CC licenses with public domain materials because it creates uncertainty as to the copyright status of the material. It is misleading and creates confusion for users as to the access and use conditions for the material. It creates a situation where the licenses are invalid, ineffective, and unenforceable. And it does not necessarily lead to a mention of the institution, as our attribution guidelines and the licenses legally only require mention of the copyrights work, title, author, creator, license, and source, which is typically a URL. So the key of kind of the foundation of the new guidelines is updating our recommendation to include the institution. The update recommendation focuses on best practices instead of limiting itself to legal necessity. So we're trying to make it easy. Let's go to the next slide. Try to make it easy for end users to provide all of the information in their attribution. And this is based on behavioral insights East model. And so make it easy for people to reference, make it something that they want to do, make it attractive, connect the action to social value, and provide information at the right moment. So this is an example of an interface that can provide a button to easily copy a reference statement, making it easy for users to comply and be good citizens. When materials are downloaded, a reference file might be included. A post-download pop-up might include the reference statement. And if the application or site supports user profiles, the reference information can be included in the user profile information. Combining the previous recommendations with IIIF metadata, I think results in a good win for everyone involved. It reinforces attribution, and it helps limit or mitigate user risk from copyleft trolling. Thankfully, copyleft trolling is much harder to accomplish with version 4 of the licenses. And so I do recommend that you update your licensing if you're using a previous version. IIIF's required statement is text that must be displayed when an item is displayed or used. For example, the required statement property to present copyright or ownership statements and reference to owning and or publishing institution or any other text deemed critical to display to users. Creative Commons recommends Tassel. This is a fictionalized example of how we have seen the required statement field being used. This example shows that the institution is asking for credit to go to the Getty Museum in Los Angeles alone, and doesn't provide information about the title, artist, or copyright status. Another fictionalized example of how we have seen the required statement field being used in the real world. This example shows that the institution is asking for the reference to which the fact the artwork was a gift from the donor. In this case, we could consider this information important somewhere else, but perhaps not the required information we want the users to know. Another fictionalized example of how we've seen the required statement field being used. This example shows that the institution is providing a notice regarding the general policy of open content, which is duplicated across all items in the collection. Now we have a fictionalized example of how Creative Commons recommends the required statement field being used. CC recommends that the required statement include crucial information for users when they share and reuse material, which is Tassel, title, author, institution, source, and license. There is additional work needed. For our part, Creative Commons needs to be consistent in recommending Tassel, including the institution, across our documentation and tooling. And I believe there's also a lot of room for software help. The required statement is fantastic, but it duplicates the data entry from other metadata fields, including label, metadata label for the author, provider, rights, etc. The duplication of the data entry includes the risk that it will be omitted in one area or the other. So as I said, we're going to work on our documentation and collaborate with Openverse, which is formerly CC Search. And I hope that you will join me in working on your institution's projects and collaborating with Creative Commons. Here, QR code, you can join the Open Culture platform. And thank you for your time.
Our third presentation is by Allison from Amsterdam, talking about bridging text and space, and referring to some of the corpus that we heard of earlier this morning, I guess.
Correct, yeah.
The project was already briefly mentioned also on the Slack channel. So the Globalize is about linking the collection of VOC with maps and places.
Indeed, yeah, you spoiled it a bit, but indeed, what I'm going to show you. This is from an end user perspective, an end user as an academic environment. I'm a data engineer at the University of Amsterdam, but also working in the Globalize project. Indeed, Hennie already talked about it, and thanks, Caitlin, for sending the YouTube link to our community call in the Slack. Very brief, bit of repetition, but Globalize is a 5-year research infrastructure project at the Royal Academy of Sciences, meant to make a research environment for researchers that want to look at the corpus of the Dutch East India Company. That material is all kept in the National Archives of the Netherlands. We focus on 5 million scans. Everything has been digitized and luckily is available through a IIIF image API. That's only part of it. 25 million pages is the total size of this corpus. So just a fraction, and it spans almost over 200 years. It's a quite unique source because it tells us what happened in the Dutch East Indies in the 16th and 17th century. And up to now, selectively, things have been published about this material, even in printed works. But there's a selection bias over there. And we think in the project that by looking at this entirety of this material, this bit of the archive, that we can get a better grip on what happened there without or maybe circumventing the previous bias that others introduced. And we can do so by incorporating the visual material. Then researchers can see what we extract from these sources, for instance. So we want to make it easier for researchers to dive into this material, not only browse through it through the traditional archival indices, but really make it researchable by first HDRing the text using a handwritten text recognition model, and further on even recognizing entities like the persons, the places, the qualities, ships. And as an extra step, what happened to these entities, so like the events, the setting sail or the starting a fight, will be challenging. We still have 2.5 years to do so, but we're nicely underway. And most likely this will be published as linked open data in our own knowledge graph, you see over here on the right side, in some form of a CDOC model, probably our own CDOC extension. We are explicitly encouraging others to connect to the project. We also have wishes to involve citizen scientists. What I'm going to show you in this presentation is maybe a step before we hand it over to the citizen scientists to give some extra context to this material. Because the primary sources are these letters, the copies that have been sent to the Netherlands, the Dutch Republic. And I think the cancelled presentation just now was about to tell about the originals kept in the archives of Jakarta. So that's a pity. But we came to the conclusion that we need a bit more information to fully tackle the problems that we face in this textual material. So hence that we introduce a visual component, these maps. As an example, this is an example document, an historic document from our textile material. We know it's in an archival inventory in the National Archives. And from this inventory, we know it's about Malabar. It's half of the west coast of India. That's what we know from the metadata. And this is the actual output of our HDR model, so it's quite good, readable by a researcher and almost no mistakes. And in this text are a couple of locations mentioned, places like the Paulistan Island, the Paulist Island is the type of Jesuit missionary, and it's somewhere in Malabar, we now know. But yeah, we don't know exactly where this is. You cannot find this in any secondary source at the moment, not in Wikidata, nowhere on the internet. The same goes for the sowing land of Buitendijk, it's also somewhere, and a garden called Bolgati. I hope I pronounced it correctly. And this is a document about leasing a bit of land, a 5 years lease, and this is sent back to the Dutch Republic to report on the transaction that was happening over there. We do this also because we think that the Dutch East India Company was, and nowadays, is way more than just a trading company. It really is a polity on its own, with its own rules and regulations. And this is a bit of the economy that they have. You already see the connection between text and image. But yeah, impossible to contextualize this document. Somewhere in Malabar, that's quite big. This area in India. And we cannot connect it to these existing sources. We have an attestation in our textual corpus, but due to shifting place names, maybe because the British came after the Dutch in this area, places have changed names, or countries have become independent, or the previous, the original, the local name is now reinstated. So it's difficult to see, as we have to work through the lens of this colonizer. The only material we have is this textual material from the Dutch East India Company, and even these maps are predominantly commissioned by the company, but at least we hope that they refer to the same place names. So we think that early modern maps can help here because they provide a link between this text and maybe a geospatial representation, where we know where it actually is on the world map. And besides this, yeah, it's an extra bit of context. It shows us how the regions were perceived by the Dutch East India Company, by the VOC, and how their use of land and water was, maybe plantations or other borders that they drew. So this talk is then about the technical solution. I think we can combine this in this existing standard of the IIIF presentation API. So by bringing together all our interpretation efforts in one single, say, manifest, or maybe the canvas is here, what bridges it all together, should be a solution to make this jump, to make it easier for users to get a bit more context for this material. So the first layer will be a georeferencing layer. It's easy to use. We use all maps, use also, and it's quite fun to do. We made 15 reference points on this map. The true image of the coast of Malabar, kept in the National Archives. It's 30,000 pixels wide, so quite big. And with these reference points, we can easily plot it on the world map. So we have made this connection that links the pixels to the WGS 84 coordinates. We can store this in the IIIF standards with the motivational purpose, georeferencing. So that's our first step, first interpretation layer that we add to the canvas. With the results, yeah, it works quite well. The coastline is very neat. And we can even get rid of the background in all maps. And you see that these islands, yeah, these correspond with how the west coast of India nowadays is represented. Second layer would be to dive into the content of these maps. In this case, the textual component. Because on these maps are, of course, toponyms. And ideally, these are the same as referenced in our textual corpus. To do so, and this is a preparation step for before we hit crowdsourcing, I took an off-the-shelf model from Map Curator. I think this is the model or a previous version that has been used to recognize toponyms in the David Rumsey collection. Quite easy to use, and I applied this on the entirety of this corpus, more than starting with 6,000 maps from this collection, but our entire map collection is almost 40,000 maps big. And that gives us an idea of where the toponyms are on these maps. It's not flawless. It has been trained on material that is predominantly with printed text, and this is all handwritten. But that's the first step, maybe to get rid of the mess and then later to fine-tune the model. This is a nice step. To process then these snippets that are extracted, we use the same HDR model, the Logi. Hennie already mentioned it this morning. It's an open source tool. You feed it these snippets and it gives you back text. It works quite well. It's even language agnostic, I'd say. So we end up with another kind of web annotation with a couple of motivations or purposes, depending on where you want to put it, in the body or in the annotation itself. So we have a tagging purpose to show, now here is a bit of text. If you then recognize this with a model, you get a supplementing bit. That's the actual text. And if you go one step further and do entity resolution, entity linking, well, this bit of text actually refers to this place. And this is tricky. This is our problem. But at least we want to connect it to the same attestation or another attestation of the same place in our textual corpus. They do exist in external sources, for instance, in Wikidata or the World Historical Gazetteer. But this historical spelling of by pin is not yet added to these. So we'll definitely do so at the end of the project or during. But this, yeah, this is an example of how difficult it is to get a grip on these place names 400 years ago. As a demo, this is publicly available. The map from just now, and this is the result of this text bottom model. As you see, it's not flawless, but it gives us an idea, and the majority of these toponyms have been recognized correctly. But I must say that if you go here, and specifically this map, you see that I added almost 4,000 annotations to this map, which kind of breaks Mirador. So that I need a bit of help from you at the end of the presentation. The final layer. So we have the translation between pixels and image and geo. We now know what's written on these maps, but usually next to a toponym is a tiny icon telling about extra information. Is this a village, or is this sowing lands, forestry, rice fields, but also ships or dragons or lions, all kinds of iconography that was added to these maps. For this, I took another model off the shelf, the segment anything, zero shot model, and you just feed it the image, and it segments whatever it can find based on what it learns, what makes sense from pixel boundaries. Everything you see on this scan is automatically segmented, as well as a lot of artifacts, because it also segments the text and every tiny line, depending on the resolution that you feed to it. But as a first step for the volunteers, it's quite easy to cluster this and make sense of this afterwards. So like the text, we can tag this with saying, here is an icon. Then we can classify it with our own thesaurus, classification, building, church or pagodes with the round roofs. And then, who knows, identify it if it's really a clear reference to a place. I admit this was with some user input, sticking a couple of points, but this model allows you to very quickly segment these, in this case, islands. And now the circle is, yeah, we're there. This is what we needed to further contextualize the historic document. You see where it is, and because of this georeference annotation, you know where it is on the world map. So if we combine this in a IIIF manifest, or maybe it's really the canvas indeed that combines this all, some pseudo JSON, we very, I think, transparently add our interpretation to this existing standard with separate annotation pages that can be fed, for instance, from the infrastructure that my colleague Hennie develops. And this also makes it linkable from our other sources. Who knows, maps refer maps, or these historic documents refer to a map. So we really see the IIIF manifest as some kind of container to hold all our interpretation, our research efforts. It's still tricky to refer to the actual thing, I think, in a knowledge graph, but there's a verse of a further session tomorrow to discuss that. Yeah, Robert's chilling, yeah. So the next steps is to further classify this, get rid of all the artifacts, and then it will be a nice moment to ask the volunteers to make sense of this, add extra topology, or even correct these models. One nice thing to say is that almost, looking at Jules, almost we have added, we have saved a corpus of almost 1,800 early modern maps. They were georeferenced by volunteers almost 10 years ago, and we made it into open data. We saved it from where they were locked in their website, and we are soon to be added in the All Maps API. So they're usable for everyone. And so it gives us a flying start in the project. But yeah, I'd love to hear from you if you have experience with tooling to do this with the crowdsourcing. I used a model from this map reading machines community that used something Topia, something that's when I last looked at it, was not really working well with IIIF. Maybe that has changed. But I'm really looking for software or viewers that exist that understand all these kinds of motivations and purposes that are needed for volunteers, but also our end users to make sense of this material. So in the coming 2.5 years, we for sure will integrate it in the research environment. But if you have any ideas on, say, viewers, and maybe the Canvas panel is able to render these 3,000 annotations at once, then I'd love to hear from you during lunch or at the drinks this evening. Thanks.
Darren invites all the speakers to the audience. Are there any questions in the room? Are there any speakers?
Yeah, the same, the existing one. This is for. This is for, I have a question about education and sort of the promulgation of wanting people to adjust to using that sort of attribution so different and how much education you have done or think there will have to be done on trying to get people in agreement about what that field is for generally. I feel like things you presented, to me read as some institutions credit line, some institutions citation line, some attribution, and places having distinctly different ideas of which those things are. I know my institution, the sort of donor gift line is perceived as being necessary with any digital image. And that they might call that attribution, but they really don't mean it that way. So I'm wondering how you've been thinking about approaching that type of education, because of course you can't just tell people everyone needs to be in agreement, make a choice, institutions.
Yeah, unfortunately, my experience with this has been secondhand. The open culture platform will be able to speak with more authority. But I know that they've had success in working with institutions one-on-one and really addressing what are your needs, and helping those institutions come up with a solution that meets those needs and also meets the needs of attribution, and clearly communicating what the rights or copyright landscape is for works.
Anyone else? Thanks very much for presentations. This might be for David, Matt, and Leon. Just the project's working with multiple languages, multiple cultures across time. Brought to mind yesterday's presentation on Floco and not all. Just wondering if there are any lessons bringing these ideas together and getting Indigenous voices connected with accounts of those cultures, etc.
Trying to think of how best to answer this question. I think the most difficult is absolutely. On my type of projects, there's an editorial board as well that are scholars in West Africa of the culture. So that I think is critical, will be critical to the ongoing success of this project. It's not just sort of folks from Northwestern and UIF network. I think that's absolutely critical. And we're excited to continue to be into that and figure out how best to find voices that can speak to those things.
This is definitely on the radar. This is in the disorders we're making with types of commodities or units or measurements. That is going to be multilingual. Yeah, we have to pick the default language, that will be Dutch. But yeah, this is early modern Dutch. It doesn't even fit that standard, I think. And it will be very tricky to present it in a viewer. But yeah, we encourage contributions from, say, Indonesia themselves.
If I could have a quick follow-up, just I've seen projects also trying to get the names on maps that were Indigenous names. That would be interesting to know, because you already have the Dutch versus English shifts of the maps.
For sure, that will be challenging using our named entity recognition models. They are trained on Western names. That's the majority of the training data. So especially for this, we expect that we need the crowdsourcing, the volunteers, to counterbalance this bias. And we're very aware of introducing a new ones that say that things are automatically corrected from HDR. We do not use this kind of language models that, or with care, at least that there is a possibility to verify.
Thank you. Yeah.
I've got a question for David and Matt. I was especially thinking about this exhibit site that you put together, and there are markdown files for the essays, and I'm wondering, was it the partners who put in those essays in markdown format, and if so, was that successful? And if so, what were the practices that you put in place to make that successful and comfortable for them?
So the answer is that we're still early in the process. and they are aware of how to do it. And they are the ones that are converting the Word documents which were provided to them by the scholars themselves and translators. From that Word document into markdowns and handoff. And they are following a basic documentation for Canon IIIF in order to create that essay matter and page content. I think it's sort of a new domain for them, but it's just markdown syntax that don't matter. So I think in that way, it's meant to be at least as complicated as it needs to be, but still very and they really, yes.
One thing with one of the scholars when we were explaining how markdown worked and what it was, she said, "Oh, this is what I do in WhatsApp." So it was surprising at how comfortable, like, she got it in 2 minutes. Well, once she like put the connection together, that's what was going on. So tip for anybody training folks on that. And then the other thing is we also built a little tool in GitHub, in a GitHub action. You just drop Word documents off and out markdown. So they don't have to sit and work with Handout. They just upload docs to we can share that out. This was
This is actually a response to a previous question in the audience. Actually attended a talk from Maui Hudson, and co-developed the care principles for indigenous and data governance. And then he was saying that the copyright that we're talking about doesn't apply to indigenous knowledge because of the fact that they don't. Copyright is we have to own the stuff, and they don't. Indigenous groups, they don't view it that way. So they're setting up their own labeling system to tell people this is how we want our knowledge to be attributed and how we want it to be reused. So as if you're an institution with indigenous collection, that you might look at the care principles, and if you're developing standards to like try standards of how to attribute, how to put attribution, then you should also look at those standards and look at how we make our standards work with the way that the indigenous people want to be attributed.
I believe there's a project that is called Traditional Knowledge Labels, which provides the tags and labels to better align with indigenous cultures and the use of materials from indigenous cultures. That's also a fantastic project to look at and digitally integrate.
There's one more question, please.
This is Jong. Thanks for the presentation, and I'm happy to see the visualization of the Navarro coast. That's where I come from. And since you mentioned about challenges in identifying the named entities in the corpus of this archive, I know that University of Leiden has an ongoing project, Cosmos Malabaricus, which closely works with the Kerala Historical Council. So do you have any collaboration with them? And secondly, it would be really great if you could incorporate the multilingual aspect of giving data also in the local language.
Thanks. Yeah, we are in touch with Leiden. The work package lead, as we do that in academic projects, I studied in Leiden, is fully aware of, it also comes from India. We work closely together. A lot of expertise indeed on the Dutch East India comes from there. And I hope that we can continue this not only on the textual level, but indeed with these visual sources, maps, going to be part of, I hope, a new project. We have to do something with these local languages, be it only the translation of the visual components in these websites to make it appeal to them, and who knows, incorporating other techniques to maybe give summaries of these texts, translations of these texts. It depends on how easy this is and how costly this will be to process all these 5 million documents, but we'll make the effort for sure, yeah. Thank you.
There's a question.
Question for David and Matt. You guys showed the new scroll component and talked about searching the transcription annotations. You talked about Canopy as a site for the digital collection. Is Canopy providing search across the collection as a whole of the annotations and transcriptions?
Currently the annotations are not being indexed, but they will soon. Right now we're just indexing the metadata, label and summary. But I think what I hope to do is really extend that further. Obviously, there's a little bit more complications there because you need to work through the fact that these annotations aren't necessarily on the manifest, and I need to fetch an annotation list as well. So still working through that, but yes, we hope that it'll be sort of what you saw with the Floco example yesterday, where you could search and in a way you're diving into the textual bodies of those annotations as well. And hopefully those things can be surfaced perhaps through other people have ideas this screen.
Looking around for maybe a last question. And maybe one question that ties you all together. We've all been talking about opening knowledge. Didn't you are focusing on the statement in the manifest, a very global statement, a basic statement about everything in the manifest. David and Matt have been focusing on what scholars can do and annotate and layers of information that are added. And Leon even mentioned that end users could start sharing extra layers of information, and they also do require some kind of attribution. So maybe just to start with the LinkedIn, does Creative Commons also have recommendations how to attribute the ownership of the annotations deeper in the manifest, or maybe even things that are added in by an audience in a different platform? How could we do that?
So in general, Creative Commons recommends to try to be as open as you can. Different people have different requirements. So if you're using the CC licenses, if you are able with your requirements and needs to just use BY, that's fantastic. Or even dedicated to the public domain with CC0. Otherwise, in general, I would say, I think there's the model of Wikipedia, right? If we're looking at collaborative annotations and different people working the same content over time, that's an excellent model.
Maybe to share in the comments, how do you implement attributions deeper to the scholars who provided the text and the translations?
I don't think we figured all of it out. For the translations as well as the scholar essays, we also deposit those in an institutional repository. So they can be cited by other scholars more easily with DOIs. But this is actually a great point to get for a copy. So I think we have to think through that a little bit more.
Leon, do you have a solution for it? You already mentioned your intention of research to share all that information, all the interpretations that you did to share it. Is that in the manifest or the annotations?
Should be. The image is public domain in the National Archives. I for sure will publish the CC body that we're required to by the Research Council. Our interpretations that we do as a project don't know how to deal with these volunteers. Not sure if they want to be mentioned, because then you can also see the mistakes they made. But yeah, we should think about this, and because these are maybe retired people that do it for fun. A lot of archives in the Netherlands have experience with this, but I've not yet seen that you can see which additions have been made by a single person. It's usually then the project, the crowd as a whole. But definitely something to check, and I think we can redefine the annotation as a whole, like we saw yesterday with some Brugman statements.
Thank you. So please join me in thanking Alberto.
Okay, before